Hey everybody, it's me, Angela Walters. Welcome to this week's live chat. I'm from Quilting is My Therapy, and I get on here almost every week to answer your questions about quilting, talk a little bit about quilting related stuff, and just have a great time. And if you're watching live, as always, I have Jessica behind the camera. She's looking for spammers, kicking them out, and getting your questions to me to ask. And in today's live chat, I'm going to be it's like a ask me anything topic. So if you're watching live, go ahead and comment with your questions. Jessica's going to get her hand cramps working, writing those down for me. I also have a sneak peek over next free motion challenge quilting along and a couple announcements. So looking forward to a great time. First of all, if you are trying to get on my website right now, you're probably getting a maintenance window or maintenance screen. Exciting news, we are switching over to a brand new website. So this has been in the works for 2 years. And if you have been around me lately, that's all you've heard about is this website. So if you're trying to click the links right now, they're not working. I apologize, but they will be up soon. This new website is going to work better than our old one. If you've ever participated in a challenge, you've probably seen my website down a time or two. And it's also going to have some cool functionality like online classes and some really cool stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. So again, if you're trying to click on the links anywhere right now, they're not working, but probably by the end of the day, we'll be up and live. So excited about that. So we know that I do a free motion challenge quilting along. It's a free video series that I do several times a year where we quilt together and practice on a project. And we wrapped one up probably about a month or so ago. And usually the first question after one finishes is, when is the next one coming? And depending on how overwhelmed I am, sometimes that's a little longer than other times. But the good news is the next free motion challenge quilting along is coming soon, within the next month. So I've already got the test prints, I've already started quilting, I've already started putting together the content that we're going to learn. And as soon as that new website launches, I'll be able to do all that fun stuff. But I thought, let's do a little sneak peek. Let me show you what we're going to talk about. So the topic for the next free motion challenge quilting along is going to be swirls. Now, we have seen swirls in some videos before, but we're going to focus completely on swirls. And I'm super excited about what we're going to cover. Everything from your meandering kind of swirl, I call it the basic swirl just because it has the least number of steps, to even more complex looking swirls. We're not necessarily harder, they just look more complex. So here is a little sneak peek of the panel. For the first time, I've incorporated designs into the panel that you can quilt along. So you can see some ribbon candy in there. That's for you, Fuzzy Face Place. And then some swirls. So working those designs so that it looks like it's part of the panel, but giving you some training wheels to kind of follow along. And then just a little photo of some of the quilting I've been doing. So I love it because these videos are free. You can participate on your sewing machine or your long arm. You can participate live with us. You can watch them later. It's just a great way to practice free motion quilting. Because the truth of the matter is, I want you to love free motion quilting as much as I do. And I know it can be scary to learn new stuff, but there's something about doing hard stuff with other people. Like, have you ever had a quilting friend be like, hey, I'm going to take this really hard class. You want to do it with me? And you're like, sure. It's like we're not afraid to try those things with other people. So stay tuned for all of that. All right, so that's upcoming stuff. I also have our Build a Quilt Block of the Month. Registration will be opening soon. Everything is ready for that. I'm just waiting for the new website. So lots of fun stuff coming up within the next, 3 weeks. So it's definitely been a busy time around here, and it's fun to finally get to show off the babies or the fruits of our labor. So very, very excited. All right. Usually when I do a live chat, there's some kind of topic. Okay, so I guess we're kind of glitching. All right, I'm going to keep going. Hopefully it will catch up because it's showing fine on mine. You got to love technology and how it all works. So if you're getting a glitchy bit, sorry about that. But normally during a live chat, I go ahead and talk about some topic. Usually it's answering one main question, but every once in a while, I like to do a ask me anything kind of thing where I just answer your questions. So usually during these live chats, we run the gamut of all different kinds of topics. So normally before my live chat, I get on live and I get on the type chat before I go live and write down your questions. And I have some of those listed here. But if you're watching live and if it's not glitching or pausing for you, go ahead and comment with your questions and I'll answer those. Because sometimes you just need a question answered. All right, so first up, And I said in the type chat, quilting related or not. It doesn't have to be quilting related. If I don't know the answer, I'll just make something up. I'm really good at the BS. So, all right, one person asked, do you wash your quilts when you're finished with them? And that is definitely a personal preference. I don't like washing my quilts as soon as I'm done because as soon as you wash them, they get kind of crinkly and you don't see the quilting as much. And I kind of like the quilting part of it. But I do know that some people love that look. So I don't wash it until it's absolutely necessary. So most of the quilts that I bring to trunk shows or that are even hanging around our event center have never been washed. So I don't know what that says about me as a housekeeper, but you know, there is that. All right, this is an interesting question. Somebody's quilting on their sit-down long arm and their thread is breaking when they move right to left. Why is that? Don't you love thread breaking issues or tension issues? So without going into too much detail, if you're quilting on a long arm where you're moving the machine, the mechanism of the bobbin is such that if you quilt in long straight lines from right to left, you can get shredding thread and breaking thread. That doesn't mean you can't quilt right to left. You just have to go in all different directions. So that's why usually if people are doing computerized quilting, we always just go left to right. But on a sit-down long arm, it really shouldn't make a difference. So, because you're moving the fabric and not the machine. Same on a sewing machine. So if it's doing it in a certain direction, it could be that maybe, for instance, if I'm going right to left, maybe my quilt is hanging down and it's pulling more on that direction. It could be that I'm just putting more movement when I go that way. It really could be a lot of different things. But what I would be interested to know, and I don't really have a good answer for you, is just pay attention to what you're doing when you're quilting that way and see if something is different than when you're quilting the other way. So I know that's like a non-answer, but the great thing about thread issues is it's probably a small thing. The hard thing is it could be one of like 100 small things. So hopefully that helps. We kind of had a lot of questions about long arms, which is kind of fun because we don't talk too much about that. But Sarah said that she just got a long arm and she can't seem to transfer her knowledge of quilting swirls and feathers from the sewing machine to the long arm. And she's kind of like, how long is that going to take? The truth of the matter is there is a transition time. It's like driving a different car. You're used to moving in this movement and now you're moving a machine that moves very fluidly and very easily. On a sewing machine, that quilt never just runs away, right? You're never just like, oh my goodness, this quilt just slips around. No, that thing is like the smush and push is what you're doing. So there is getting used to that movement and the momentum of the machine. Now, the good news is it doesn't take as long to transfer as it did to actually learn it. You already know how the design goes together. I like to say 80% of quilting is just knowing where you're going. I mean, I completely made that stat up, but I think it sounds about right. So just keep practicing, keep working on it, and I promise it will come together pretty quickly. I will say usually for most long armers, it's the freedom of movement that gives them trouble. And so what can happen is you might hold on to the machine really tight and you might get really close to it and might hold your breath thinking all those things are going to help. That's actually not the case. So try to have a relaxed grip. Try to keep that momentum down, and I promise you'll get it soon. In fact, somebody else unrelated, I don't think I made a note of her name, Mar Q said she has a new long arm, and she has learned not to white knuckle when quilting. 100% true. It's counterintuitive, but holding on tighter can make it harder. So I usually tell people in my classes on a long arm, if I see them clenching, I tell them to use their fingertips, because you can't clench your whole body with your fingertips. So again, Sarah, the answer is practice, but the good news is it's not going to take quite as much practice as you might think. So hopefully that helps. This is not a question, but a comment. Susan said she visited our quilt shop 2 weeks ago and had great friendly service and loved the shop. And so I just have to throw this out there because I have great staff members that make all that possible. So if you go to the shop and it looks beautiful, it's because I have great help. So I do enjoy hearing that, and I like to say that just to give a shout out to my employees that help me with that. All right, next question. Joanne has no space for a long arm. My first thing would say, do you need your dining room table? Do you really need your kitchen? Probably not. No, I'm just kidding. But she asked, is a sit-down long arm worth it, or should she just stick with the sewing machine? Okay, you do not have to have a long arm to have great quilting. I like to say that a lot of people don't use their equipment to its full capability. So I'm not going to sit here and say you have to buy one to be able to machine quilt. However, a sit-down long arm is going to give you a completely different experience than quilting on your sewing machine. Not only is that sit-down machine already set up for machine quilting, it usually has a more powerful motor than your sewing machine, of course, depending on your sewing machine. And it's made just for quilting. So there's no, switching the foot and switching the settings. And so it gives you a much better experience. And usually they have a bigger throat space, so a lot more room to move. Now, I think it's worth it. You still have to make your quilt sandwich, but you'd have to do that on your sewing machine. But then you can leave your sewing machine set for piecing and then have your machine for machine quilting. It's a popular option for people that don't have space or that can't stand up. There's people that just can't stand for long periods of time. And there's also quilters that want to just put their hands on the quilt and they have more control that way. So the best thing I can do I can suggest is try going to a dealer and trying one out. I think you'd be surprised about how much different the experience is. So hopefully that helps. We have set up long arms in some interesting spaces, I will say. I have set it up in a bedroom, a living room, and definitely a lot of basements. So there is that. All right, so Rena asked a question about a good marking tool that keeps its point. So totally understand that. I like to use the Mark Be Gone. That's that water-soluble marker. And sometimes it gets a little, like not so sharp. But usually when I'm marking my lines, I'm just kind of marking a general reference. So it's not necessarily an ornate design that I'm following with. But they do make fine tip water-soluble markers. So you can check out any kind of marking tool with a fine tip. Somebody else suggested a mechanical chalk pencil. Gotta love that idea. And then I just had to throw this idea. Mary Rose, who is always on the live chat, on the type chat before, she uses her pizza wheel like a marking tool. So kind of like a hair marker that marks that groove, she uses that pizza wheel. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Just make sure it's not too sharp. You don't want to cut the fabric, right? All right, such great questions. Last one I have, and then I'll take them from Jessica. Darlene said she wanted me to talk about controlling the speed of the machine with my hand. I make it look so easy. Well, first of all, if I didn't make it look easy, you wouldn't want to try it. Like if you ever watch a tutorial and they're like, easy way to baste your quilt, and you watch it and you're like, that does not look like fun at all. So I do make it look easy because I have practiced a couple times. Now, when I'm quilting on a long arm, I have the habit of quilting with one arm or one hand. It's just my habit. Now, I wish I had learned better to use both hands. If I do use both hands at the same time, I feel like they're fighting each other. So I just use the one. I'm not saying that's the way you should do it. But what you can't tell is I am keeping a light movement. I don't know why I'm moving my arm, like that's going to help you understand me moving the machine. It's like the hand movements. But I am keeping a light grip on it and I'm just guiding the machine. Think of it not like you're pushing it, but just like you're guiding it. I know that doesn't make any sense, but that's just from practice. I promise, though, it doesn't take as much practice as you might think. So great questions. Those were just the ones I got before I went live. So I'm sure there have been some questions since I went live, and Jessica is going to hand those to me. If you're not watching live, no worries. You can leave your questions in the comments. I get on there from time to time to answer your questions, and other quilters are so generous with their information, so please feel free to do that. All right, how do I quilt designs that cross multiple quilting areas? For example, long feathers. So I'm assuming, I do a lot of quilting on my long arm. I can only work in a section this big. So what happens if that design moves within that section? Oh, there's a couple different ways you can handle it. I'm just going to give you kind of the short answer, but I might set that aside and make that its own live chat topic. When working through multiple areas, you have to either advance the quilt back and forth within that design, or you have to break up that design into chunks. So I kind of think of it like you can chunk up the design, or you can chunk up the area. That's kind of how I think about it. I try really hard to pick designs that don't require me to advance back and forth. For instance, again, this is going to be the quick thing, but if I'm doing a feather and I have to quilt part of the spine, advance the quilt more of the spine, and then come back, that's just not very efficient, and it's also hard to keep it smooth. So I might quilt the feather so that it runs off the edge and then comes back over here. I'm going to kind of break it up into chunks to make it a little bit easier. How you approach a quilt on a long arm is totally different than how you'd approach it on a sewing machine. On a sewing machine, that's no problem because you can just move the quilt around. So I'm picking designs based on their ability to be broken up into chunks. So I'll make that its own topic because there are some ways and tips and tricks to deal with that. But for instance, if somebody were to come to me and say, I want long diagonal lines that all go to the center, I'm going to say no thanks because I know that doing that on a long arm is going to be difficult. So I'm picking designs that try not to do that. But I have ways to make it look as though they are doing that. So maybe I'll make that next week's live chat topic. So any recommendation on a long arm with a computer that's affordable and low maintenance? So the Pro Stitcher or the computerized long arming is such a fun option because you can set that machine up and let it quilt for you. Now, it's not like just pushing a button and walking away. I like to say it's like a 4-year-old. You don't have to hold it the whole time, but you can't leave it home alone. So, of course, I'm a Handy Quilter dealer, so I have bias to that. I love the Handy Quilter brand, and we have the Moxie machine, which is our entry level, and you can get the Pro Stitcher Lite all for a really good price. So kind of the way to get both of those components. But another option you have is you don't have to get the Pro Stitcher or the Computerized at the same time as your long arm. And I think that's the same probably with most long arm brands. You can get the long arm and then add that later. So just a couple different options there. What's funny is I don't use the Pro Stitcher a lot. I love to free motion, but I have owners that love it. So it's kind of like whatever makes you happy. On a different note, this is not related, I love it when gentlemen come in the shop and look at the Pro Stitcher quilting and say, that's cheating. My mom never did that. And I like to say, oh, cool, you don't use power tools? How interesting. So it's not cheating. It's just a different skill set. So anybody that has set up an edge-to-edge design on a computerized and advanced it knows that that's the case. So. All right, how do I get my all-over swirls to look uniform and random? Mine tend to look like they're in a line and I get stuck on where to go. Well, congratulations, you're totally normal. Our brains love routine, they love a pattern, and we kind of get into that pattern. It's the same reason that we'll go to a quilt show and we'll look at a quilt and have to find the block. Where's the block? How did they make this? So if your swirls are going in a row and not looking random, you're not echoing enough. So echoing is what helps you move around so that you don't keep going in that same direction. So what you can do is give yourself a different routine to follow. 2 swirls and an echo. Because what that does is get you to a different point so that you can then branch off of there. So use that echoing to help you maneuver around. Now you might think, oh, it's going to stand out. But if you keep the spacing between the echo lines the same as a swirl, they're all going to blend together. So echo, echo, echo. That's about my answer for everything, right? So try to incorporate a little more echoing into there. How long does it take me to free motion a quilt? Do I pace myself or keep going until done? So how long does it take me to free motion a quilt? You know the answer. It depends. That's my answer for everything. I would say I'm probably quicker than most because I don't spend a lot of time stopping and looking at it. Like when I get quilting, I put my headphones on and I just go until somebody interrupts me. Depending on what's going on with life, sometimes I have to stop after a few minutes. But once I get in a groove, I like to just go, go, go. So it just depends. The challenge quilt that I'm working on right now, I'm almost done with it, and I have about 3 hours in it, but it's smaller. So, but I think the thing to remember is that we all quilt at a different speed, and we all have different things going on in our lives. So don't, feel like, oh, I have to quilt really fast. I just like to quilt fast. That's kind of how I've always done it. I think it's because when I started long arming, my kids were so young and it was like, put the kids to bed and it was go time, right? I got 45 minutes to quilt before they get up from their nap. So I'm kind of a, for lack of a better term, balls to the wall kind of quilter, but you definitely don't have to do that. All right, if I'm free motion quilting on a sit down, a sewing machine, do I use basting spray to make my quilt sandwich? I do not. I love to use fusible batting because I don't really have a good place to spray because it goes everywhere. And I don't like to use pins because they get in the way. They're like speed bumps to me. So I like to use the fusible batting. But truly, it doesn't matter. You use whatever method works for you. Just make sure you get those layers stuck together so you can start quilting. But I know plenty of people that use basting spray and love it. I just don't have a good place to do that. I have an ugly fabric collection I turned into 20 underwear applique blocks. Any ideas how to quilt this? Okay, first of all, I'm just hoping that none of my fabrics are in that ugly fabric collection. Second of all, an underwear quilt is amazing. I think that is awesome. I hope some of them are thongs. I think that would be super great. And then third of all, you have to know I have the sense of humor of a teenage boy. So I'm thinking like poop emojis. Do you think that would be kind of funny? Like they're behind there. No, I am serious, but only half serious. So, oh my gosh, I first of all, I want to see a picture of this quilt. I'm sure everybody listening does. Ugly fabric collection. I turn into underwear. So how would you quilt it? Gosh, usually I say look at the quilt and decide the most important thing about that quilt. What do you love the most about it, and how do you highlight it? So I guess I would just say swirls, because the ugly fabrics, you probably aren't going to pull out any of the prints to use in there. And but I do think a poop emoji would be great. Maybe like some swirls coming out behind it like it's gas, right? Like, I mean, I could go on this for days, but I will say in general, if I can't decide what to quilt, I go for an all-over swirl design because it's just a great way to add a nice texture and movement. And I hope that you all are laughing as much as I am with that. That's so cute. All right. I got to see a picture of that when it's done too, by the way. So anyway, just tag me in it. Just say ugly underwear collection, and I'll know exactly what's going on. All right, any Midnight Quilter episodes coming up? It's been a full year since my last Midnight Quilter episode, and that's a very common question. But I am so excited because my husband you can't see it, but all around me is brand new filming equipment that makes the whole process quicker and easier. So yes, there are going to be some new episodes coming up. And the first one I was going to show you today before the website was down. It's going to be a touchdown football themed table runner that uses a panel. So I'll hopefully be able to share a sneak peek of that next week once the website is up and functioning perfectly. So yes, new episodes coming up. I can't wait to share those. I'm making a scrappy quilt with alternating white and print 3-inch blocks. How would you quilt those? It depends. I giggle every time I say that because I can imagine somebody's face like, okay, yes, it's only funny 3 times, but it is true. So I say it all the time. So again, when I'm looking at that quilt, I'm trying to pick my favorite thing and how can I enhance it with the quilting. If your favorite thing about that quilt is that all your points match, all those squares come together perfectly, that would be my favorite thing because I am not a great piecer. I'm going to pick designs that go to the corners of that block to show it off, kind of like, hey, check this out. Like, this is a really good point. But if I didn't do a good job piecing it, I'm not going to use designs that draw your attention to that. So kind of gives you an idea what I'm thinking of. Since they're 3-inch blocks, that's kind of small. It's kind of small to put a feather in. That's usually my is it big enough for a feather or not? I would be interested to know if those blocks make a different secondary design, or if it's just truly a scrappy, checkerboard style. If that is the case, I might just do an all-over design in that, or maybe quilt the white blocks a little bit differently than the scrappy blocks, just to highlight the difference there. Another thing I like to do is sometimes if I'm looking at a quilt like that, if there is maybe a couple of prints or a couple areas of the quilt that are my favorite, like these are the points that match, or these are the fabrics I did not use in the ugly underwear collection quilt, I might quilt those differently. So using the quilting to group them together, some kind of geometric design, to pull those blocks together and then just do an all-over design in the rest of the area. I think sometimes, I know I do this, but some quilters will think, ooh, I need to do custom difficult stuff over the whole quilt. And that's not necessarily the case. I can do something interesting in a couple of areas and then just do an all-over design in the rest and have a beautiful looking quilt that I can then use and love. Now, I will say, don't take my advice and then try to enter a quilt show. That's a totally different thing. But I'm just talking about the quilts that we want to finish up and use and love at home. Because if you're like me, you might have a quilt top or 2 lying around that needs to be quilted. So, all right, the last question for this live chat. How do I determine the height of my long arm? So very important. When you're quilting, especially if you're standing, you don't want to be in a position where you have to bend over. It might feel fine at first, but if you're thinking about, lots of time at your machine, you need to have the proper height. And it's the same for a sewing machine, or really anything we do in life. On the long arm, I don't want the machine so tall that I have to I can't see what I'm doing, but I don't want it so low that I'm bending over. I kind of use the right under your rib cage is kind of a good idea. So when we set up long arms, we have people go up to it and see, I want my arm to not be angled down if I'm holding on to the handlebars. I don't want to be like this. It needs to be parallel to the floor or up a little bit. And I think if you're not sure what to go with, err on the side having it a little too high. It is a lot easier to lower your long arm than it is to raise it. So if you have it, getting it set up maybe a little taller. My machine is pretty tall. I like mine very tall because I want to kind of almost lean on it. So it is a personal preference, but whatever you do, don't be in a position where you have to bend over, because that's not going to be any fun for anybody. So great questions. Like I said, I don't do the Ask Me Anything topics a whole lot, but I just love how we kind of run the gamut of topics. So very good. If you're not watching live again, or you didn't get your question answered, leave it in the comments. Like I said, I try to get on there from time to time and answer them, and other quilters are generous with that as well. I'll be back next Thursday, 3 p.m. Central, with the next live chat. Not sure what we're going to talk about, maybe about quilting big designs and like I talked about there. So looking forward to that. And again, the website is under maintenance mode, but looking forward to hopefully revealing my brand new website to you next week. So until then, everybody, stay safe and happy quilting. I'll see you next Thursday.